Okay, we are here not live as usual because the internet is down in Bombay Beach. But we're here with Richard, aka
Dick of the Desert.
Why Dick of the Desert.
Well, for one thing, most of my decisions that in life, like all kinds of decisions, I make them because it makes me laugh or at least smile. Like business decisions. I was once about to go in business with a guy, uh, and he said, "Why do you want to name the business?" I had a jokey business name. He says, "Why do you want to name it that?" And I said, "Because it makes me laugh." He says, "I've never thought of trying to make business decisions on that basis." But I make most decisions on that basis. So I just thought, oh, Dick the Desert. Besides which, my actual name as a musician, there's a guy with that name who does this kind of voodoo Haitian stuff. And I thought, if you Google me, it could be weird to be mixed up with that guy. So I thought, yeah, got to
Oh,
come
your
up
actual
with a
name, you
different.
mean Richard Morse, not Dick of the Desert.
Yeah, there's Richard Morse is like this sort of voodoo priest slash musician in Haiti, and pretty well known actually. If you Google him, you get a bunch of hits. So it's kind of like it would be confusing. You got to have a different name.
So I first met Richard at the Ski Inn, which is the local bar in Bombay Beach, and it is the lowest bar in the Western Hemisphere because we're 230 feet below sea level, and for the longest time, I thought of you as a cover artist. You would do beautiful renditions of Roy Orbison and other 50s and 60s classics. But it was not very nothing very controversial or just kind of nice, set a nice atmosphere. And then I started noticing Richard at the community meetings, which are indeed controversial and full of tension, and it's where the town meets once a month to discuss everything,
Where we go to win friends and influence people.
quote unquote, everything happening to this town, and I noticed how eloquently and with such nuance and grace you kind of stood up for us and stood up for things that you thought mattered. And I thought this guy has a lot going on in his head and is able to express it very well. And then that was confirmed when I went back to the ski in once, and it was a more intimate gathering. And you said you were going to sing one of your original tunes, and I was just delighted when I heard this very funny, very irreverent song, which I thought suited your personality more than the covers. And it was called I'll Never Wash My Dick Again. And you had the whole crowd and it just roaring in laughter. And anyway, I've just always wanted to know you more. And I find this podcast a great way to get to know people and introduce people to the world and the world to us and what we're doing in this peculiar little town of Bombay Beach. So why don't you tell me a little bit of your background and how you ended up here, which is always an interesting story.
It's a question I ask a lot too, because you can't land in Bombay Beach by accident. You have to be trying to come here. And the question is, why would anyone try to come here? Why would you get in your car and go to this very remote spot to be here? In my case, as quite often, well, what I find is there's sort of three classes or three sedimentary layers of Bombay Beach society. There's the old guard, the people who are in their 80s and 90s now. They came in the 60s and 70s because it was a party town. So they came here for fun and recreation, to hang with their pals. There was fishing. There were 6 bars in this town. It was lively. So there's that layer. Only now they're mostly kind of old. Well, obviously old, but also old in that sense of get off my lawn. They don't want to be bothered. They're the people that generally aren't fond of the newcomers. So the newcomers are also kind of a party crowd, very sociable. The art group, the people who are like, oh yeah, my artist friends are there and there's cool stuff happening.
The art people, they call us at the
Yeah.
meetings. Yeah.
So there's like the art people and the followers of the art people, all of the tourists and people who, Instagram models now who come here to be photographed. I mean, I have an Airbnb in town, and my first guests, first thing they asked me was, "Where's the swing?" Because they've seen that swing, and beautiful women love to pose in the swing, and their reflection is really gorgeous. And they'd driven here from Oregon just to go out there and get photographed on the swing. So there's that layer, but in between that layer are the traumatized refugees from the normal world, who got here through some sort of crisis. And I've talked to a number of them. It's like, okay, how did you land here? Oh, bankruptcy, divorce, so I was in the middle of it, which I believe, I've never asked you about this, but I've read a bit about you, Tao. So it was a divorce that sent you out here too, wasn't it?
Well, it's the divorce that allowed me to make the commitment of buying a house here, which I was already in love with Bombay Beach while I was married. But when I proposed the idea of buying a house in Bombay Beach, I was met with a blank stare of like, who would want to buy a house in Bombay Beach, and what on earth are you thinking? So it was only after the divorce that I was able to do the insane thing of buying a house in Bombay Beach. But it wasn't the divorce that pushed me here. I fell in love with Bombay Beach a few years prior to that.
Well, so how did you find, because you don't land here without trying to come here, or were you just driving 111 for an adventure?
No, I didn't know the Bombay Beach was here. I stumbled on a book. I've told this story before, so I'll make it brief. But I stumbled on a book about Kim Stringfellow's book on the Salton Sea. And I loved going to bookstores when that was still a thing, and just browsing the books. And there was a photo of a rotting trailer in unnaturally red water. And I love Americana and trailers and desert. And I was like, how do I not know this place exists? And so I jumped in my car and just decided to circle the sea alone. And I think Bombay Beach was I went the other way. No, I ended up here almost near the end somehow, and it's the far shore, and you really think you've seen it all once you get to the North Shore, and then you go miles and miles without anything, and I just assumed we'd reached the end of civilization, and then all of a sudden you pass Mecca, and then suddenly Bombay Beach, 8 miles. And then welcome to Bombay Beach, and there's this little square, and it's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And I was immediately just in love, even though there was no art here, and it was a little scary and sad, but it was still so peculiar and wonderful.
Yeah, I bet Kim Stringfellow has thrown a brick through the window of many a life, probably, because I didn't know that she had been to Bombay Beach, but I saw...
She's a professor and a photographer and an artist. And
I saw a museum exhibit about Wonder Valley that she did, about the Jackrabbit homesteads, and I was fascinated with that. So it would fit that she would have discovered this as well. I haven't met her, but she impacted your life and mine. Well, so I ended up here because I was in the middle of a divorce that left me temporarily broke. The judge impounded the money, and the house was sold. And I was like, okay.
Where were you living?
In this $1 million neighborhood in Oxnard, right on the beach in Hollywood Beach, next to Channel Islands Harbor.
And what was your married life like? What kind of work did you do?
I used to be, up until I just shut the business down last year, I was an eBay seller. So I was fortunate that I could move almost anywhere if I had internet and a post office that functioned. So I did my business from Germany, where I used to live, and from California, and I could still do it in Bombay Beach, so I used to do that too. But I had a severe cash problem, i.e., no money and just a bit that was trickling in, and lawyers to pay. And I thought, well, where do you go when you're broke in California and you still kind of have to be around to be at a court date on short notice, so kind of have to stay in California. And I started Googling. I went on Zillow and said, okay, up to $10,000, what can I buy? And I landed on various towns like Barstow and Trona, and they didn't have anything interesting about them. And I found Bombay Beach. At that time, there were a half a dozen things for sale here in this town.
Yeah. They would sit
Between-
on the market for years.
Yeah, and I thought, and then I also then started Googling it and got to like Huell Hauser visits Bombay Beach, and there was a John Waters documentary, and I thought, well, if you're gonna be broke, do it with style. You know, like be broke somewhere cool. So let's go out there, and I found a place for rent.
What year?
2016. It's like right after Biennale year 0. And so I wasn't here for that. And I found a place in the Bombay Beach Motel. It's like $300, including utilities at that time.
Do me a favor and bring the mic a little towards you so when you
yeah.
turn towards me, it doesn't so much.
All right.
Yeah, no, and bring it this way.
Yeah,
so when you turn towards me. Sorry, everyone. As usual.
Hope
we're
the
having-
sound of this stand is not coming through.
It is.
I'm afraid. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. I just wanted you to nudge it over a tiny bit.
Well,
That's okay. Will you
there's
be able
only
to?
so much nudging you
soon-
can do between the table and the.
That's better though. That's
yeah.
much
All
better.
right. Well, so where was I?
You thought?
You sure you're not going to edit
April-
that out?
I'm not going to edit anything.
Darn.
It's okay.
So there I was in the Bombay Beach Motel, and the late great Sue Fuller was my landlord, and I moved in, and she says, "You know, something you might like to know about this town is we have this really nice art festival that happens." You know, and I was like, "Art festival?" You know, I'm imagining, okay, watercolors of desert landscapes by amateur artists. You know, I was not excited, but then when the Biennale came around, year 1, I saw what I stumbled into. You know, so I just came here looking for cheap rent, and stumbled into this. I mean, well, now, of course, in 2016, Bombay Beach was still, you know, there wasn't that much art here. That thing was just starting. Now this place is just, you know, amazing. Like people, as you know, come here from all over the world. Everybody's mad about the Lodestar and the swing. What is there a name for that swing out in the?
I don't know. One of my favorite things is the. Unfortunately, it got changed after I pointed this out. But if you went to the Wikipedia page for Bombay Beach, it had this very, like, appropriately absurd and minimalist description of the town, which is not even a town, it's a census designated place.
Yes.
So I like to think of it as the closest thing to anarchy that we have in this country, because there is no actual central authority, which I adore, and some people drives them crazy. But so it describes the census designated place. It says that it's 230 feet below sea level. It says that the population is 250, and then it says has a little subsection on the art that's happening here. And it has one of my houses called the Zigzag House, and it just says artistic house. And then it has Randy Palumbo's Lodestar, which is one of the most magnificent, like, installations you've ever seen anywhere in the world. It's a 50-foot tall World War II bomber bent to be looking like it's nose diving into the ground, and then turned into a giant flower that's kind of full of colors and objects that look like
Pornography.
sex toys, and it just said airplane. And then my friend Michael Bernberg made this beautiful giant metal kind of etching of negative space that looks at the sea, and it says the only other thing is nothing, which I often sit and think about the layers of meaning that has, that if we allow this sea to disappear or we don't take care of it, what's left is nothing, right? And so you know, it says the only other thing is nothing. On the Wikipedia page, it just said nothing. And and I just thought that was just great. So we've got artistic house, airplane, and nothing, and those were the 3 examples that were given.
Wow, they immortalized the Zigzag House.
Yeah, as artistic house.
Okay.
One of obviously many.
Note cow on roof.
Yeah.
Or is it the other house?
No,
has a cow on
the
roof?
cow on the roof is next door.
Yeah.
I imagine people who have not been to Bombay Beach or who are listening and just don't know what we're talking about must be very bewildered right now.
There's a cow on the roof.
Can you? So there was a little bit of art when you got here, though. See, when I got here in 2008, there was not even there wasn't even the thought of art yet here.
Well, I don't know. When I first got here, I don't remember any permanent, art installations. I don't even think the Bombay Beach Opera House, I think, was year one. There might have been something, but also the drive-in wasn't there. Yeah, there wasn't much in the way of permanent stuff. I don't remember anything when I first got here that was something where you could say, hey, look at that. I mean, now when I bring friends here, we drive up and down the streets and I show them, all these things.
Which
But
is a
in
risk
those
in a way,
days-
right? Because it's a risk in a way having it become an attraction. I mean, I think we've tried to not be that by not having any commerce and not having anything for sale, and obviously keeping the art weird, and that happens on its own. Luckily, there are no, watercolors. I always imagine it would be funny if there was like a Orange County style art gallery that sold those like cheesy like desert photos and sunsets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Some twist on that.
Yeah, there should be sort of like a non-surreal, non-Dadaist version of the Biennale where they go like, okay, we're going to take over the parking lot of the community center and we'll sell our paintings of sad clowns and stuff. Speaking of which, I have to go up there and find out. I bought one of the Bombay Beach ruin houses where somebody, I went up there, they were taking their belongings out. Like they sold it to me and they said, okay, let us come in and take our things out. There was a painting of a sad clown on velvet. I hope they left it. I want to go up and see.
That sounds like something Stefan would.
I want my clown. Yeah.
And so what happened when you arrived? You moved here, and what was your life like as a permanent resident here? And what did you come kind of equipped with in terms of experience with small towns or with like living in this? There is no such thing as this sort of place because it's so utterly unique. But I'm curious, like what the juxtaposition was from your previous life to this life.
Yeah, I came here I was wrecked. I mean, I was like involved in lawsuits. I was afraid I was going to, end up completely, broken, homeless. And I was, if you've ever been in those rooms at the Bombay Beach Motel, that's about as low as you can go and still actually have electricity and running water.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about like a 12-foot by 12-foot room with a little bathroom off to the side. And so I was just kind of there licking my wounds and going, what the hell's happened to me? I was in shock. So it was like a really rough year for me.
How long had you been married?
Oh, just a couple years. It was just this sort of mishap. It was a woman who had been my girlfriend. And we had an on-again, off-again relationship. And but to be a pal, I agreed to marry her so she could get a green card because she wanted to live here. And I was lonely. I was like, okay, come live with me. And then I realized that it was a drag being married to somebody I didn't love. And so I said, okay, look, we need to get a divorce. I've brought you here and got your green card. Now let me live my life. Well, she decided I was going to pay for my impertinence, to let it go. So she lawyered up and grabbed for as much money as she could get. It was like 2 years that we were married. You wouldn't have thought that would have been such a big deal. But it turns out, this is a warning to all the guys out there,
And girls.
even a short marriage, you can really get hammered. I mean, because actually it wasn't the money she got. Like her attorney bills were much more than she actually got out of me.
Right.
So it was just kind of a revenge thing.
The whole institution of divorce is set up to make people, people benefit that aren't the couple, the more adversity there is. So there's not a coincidence that the lawyer is like, actually, it's like a systemic issue where people are made to hate each other because they benefit from that.
Yeah, it's an industry where the lawyers deliberately, I mean, who knows what's true, because my ex didn't always tell the truth, but she had told me that the settlement offer that she finally accepted, I had actually given her a year earlier, or at least 9 months earlier. And she claims her lawyer never told her, just to prolong things and run up the bill, that he didn't tell her what I was offering, because I'd made this very generous, just like, please go away and let me have my life. Anyway, so yeah, the lawyers have an incentive to run up the bill, and that's what they did, and it was really a horrific experience. I had no idea because I just thought this is the modern world. This is like 2016. We're all grown-ups here. Everybody knows that most, or at least half couples get divorced. Let's make this easy and painless. Which what I thought was what the powers that be that write the laws would just say, you know, okay, divorce is something you got to go through. I mean, bankruptcy, for example, I've gone bankrupt. That's actually pretty simple. You just like fill out the forms, get the rubber stamp, and you're done. But with the divorce, it was just like, oh, I have a community property interest in this house that I had owned for years, So it was just a crazy thing. I landed out here, and but it's been the most magnificent. I mean, I can hardly be angry about it, even though the judge, the lawyers, my ex-wife, they all behaved badly. But if they had not behaved as badly as they had, I would have missed out on this whole Bombay Beach experience, which for me, I mean, this has just been like, it was really literally a phoenix rising from the ashes, a death and rebirth experience to come out here. Because I had also pretty much quit music. I had been a professional musician all through the 90s and the 2000s. And
Where?
I got in Germany, because in Germany they pay a lot better than they do in America. Audience is very enthusiastic. And so I made a full-time living there, did really well. But I was so bored by the end. I was so bad that I had this watch that was very accurate. And if quitting time was like 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd be watching the second hand on my watch and I'd be going, okay, 30 more seconds. We'll cut out the last verse of this song just to make it end earlier so I can like quit right on time,
And what were you singing? Were you singing your own songs? Or other
No,
people's
I was
songs?
singing all this garbage that I can't. I mean, like if I never ever play Hotel California again, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Sweet Home Alabama, I never liked it in the first place. I mean,
Yeah.
the melody's got 3 notes in it and only 3 chords, and it just goes on like that for like 4 minutes. Boring.
So why did it take you so long to pull out your original tunes here?
Because I thought they were too weird, But
Too weird for Bombay Beach is saying a lot.
well, I just thought like playing some of these songs, like I'll Never Wash My Dick, could get you fired in certain places, and certainly I would never play that at the Fountain of Youth. Fountain of Youth, for those who haven't been to Bombay Beach, it's up the hill from Bombay Beach, and it's like pristine. It's a nice family place, and they run a tight ship up there, and there's no way I would play that up there.
Could you
but
pick
in
up your
skiing-
guitar and play so that people can have a taste of your wit and irreverence?
Yeah.
This is called "I'll Never Wash My Dick Again," and this is what made me fall in love with Dick of the Desert's music. And I just want people to have a taste so that when they hear the rest of the interview, they will know what they're dealing with.
Well, I would like to tell the story of the song was that I had a short but turbulent but passionate relationship with a woman here in Bombay Beach, so we spent the night together, but by the time she left, it was one of those things where I don't know, somehow it was like I thought, I might never see her again. I don't know if we're even going to do this one more time. It was lovely, but that might be the end. So there I was taking a shower in the morning, where all good ideas come in the shower. And I had this thought, it's like, I don't even want to wash because I would like to just have her scent on me, And so then I got the idea for this song and it cracked me up. And I thought, well, I could never sing this in public. So I tried not to write it, but I just kept coming up with one verse after the other. And pretty soon it was written. And I told the woman in question that I'd written it. I didn't play it for her. I just said, I wrote a song about my experience with you, and here's the title. She's like, well, don't ever play that. You must never, ever play that song. So I kind of kept my promise.
Not listening.
For quite a while. I don't think so. She's not a fan, obviously. Well, we parted under. We weren't real amicable, although we do say hello to each other now, and She doesn't she doesn't spit in my direction when she sees me. But anyway, but eventually I liked the song so much.
She doesn't spit in my direction when she sees me. It could be another song you could write, maybe.
Yeah, right. So, we shared a blissful night of love divine.
A little farther from the mic. Push it out a little, because now it's loud and it's peaking. Hold on.
Yes, indeed. I thought I heard that thing distorting.
Just push this out a tiny bit. And then just remember to put it back again when you're...
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I got it. I'm a professional.
Let's hear it. There we go. I'll never wash my dick again.
We shared a blissful night of love divine. You promised more, but then you changed your mind. And now I'm all alone, just staring at the phone, with one thought that keeps going through my mind. I'm never gonna wash my dick again. 'Cause baby, you're the best that's ever been. When I had you, I couldn't get no higher. Now my Johnson might as well retire. I'm never gonna wash my dick again. I've known my share of pussy in my time, but never have I known one so divine. Who cares if I've got wood? Without you it's no good. Oh darling, how I wish you'd change your mind. I never gonna wash my dick again. 'Cause you got the finest pussy he's been in. If I can't have you, then what's the point? I got no use for my poor old joint. I'm never gonna wash my dick again. Oh darling, if you'd only change your mind, I'd scrub my dick with Lysol till it shines. And for the coup de grace, I'd scrub my hairy ass. I'd powder up my balls to make you mine one more time. I'm never gonna wash my dick again. If I can't have you, I'm gonna pack it in. It don't matter if it stinks down there. He can fall off for all I care. I'm never gonna wash my dick. It's enough to make you sick. I'm never gonna wash my dick again, but I'll still scratch it. I'm never gonna wash my dick again.
Well, that was one of the finest renditions I've heard of that song.
How many renditions have you heard? The one at the ski inn.
Yeah, I've heard you sing it a few times.
Well, I was in the middle of telling the story of how Bombay Beach brought music back to me. So I had quit out of sheer boredom, and just when you're playing music in a bar, particularly those bars with TV screens in them, it's a drag. You're doing the best you can, making music, and the people are barely listening, and they're talking among themselves. The talking is louder than the singing, and it's just not. After a while, I was like, I don't need the money that badly. The heck with it. I'm selling stuff on eBay. I stopped playing music for years.
What are you selling on eBay anyway?
Well, I was selling microphones.
Oh, okay.
Used microphones, because it was something I knew a little about. So, I just quit playing music. But then I spent some time in Slab City,
Can you describe Slab City for those who do not know what it is?
Slab City is another reason why I came out here.
Yeah, Slab City is amazing and weird.
Yeah, and partly because I was interested I started researching communes, various, anarchists and idealists gathering together and forming intentional communities. And what I noticed reading the histories of various communes was that they all fell apart after, maybe a maximum of 15, 20 years, generally, usually the charismatic founder dies or goes to prison or something, and commune falls apart. And then I'd heard of Slab City, and I thought, well, okay, this is it's a real lawless place, more so than Bombay Beach, where
Much more, yeah.
nobody owns the land. Everybody's just squatting on this desert land.
Thousands of people.
Yeah. Thousands of them. They've been doing it since the 70s with no laws, no organization, no utilities.
Yeah, no electricity, no services, no trash collection, no running water, no sewage.
In the 120-degree heat, like really harsh conditions. And even like in the winter when it rains, you're in some camp and a flash flood comes down and like all your bedroll is all wet. And it's just really, really rough conditions.
I say it's Burning Man minus the yuppies plus meth and guns.
Something like that.
And permanent. So
yeah. But it fascinated me because I thought they've been doing this for now over 40 years back in those days. Now it's about 50 years that people have been going up there and just camping. So I wanted to see that too. And something I like about it is that, they don't have this saturation of entertainment. And also in Bombay Beach, it isn't I was just in my old stomping grounds where I used to live. Just yesterday, I was in Ventura. And you walk up and down Ventura, and there's like a dozen bars with live bands, and everybody's playing renditions of songs by the Eagles. So it's just, there's this saturation of every kind of entertainment. And so nothing is special to anybody. But out here, and especially in Slab City where they barely have electricity. I mean, people have little solar rigs to charge up their phones with, and that's about it. And the internet's really spotty too. So the way they entertain each other is, sit around a campfire and take turns playing songs to each other, which is the way people entertained each other 200 years ago.
Yeah.
You gather around the parlor, around the piano. And it just felt so real. So like this is the way people actually, there's something more immediate, more intimate about, here's some dude sitting next to you of maybe, fair to middling talent, playing some song he really loves because he loves it, which is different from turning on a television and there's, I don't even know who's famous now. Somebody's Cardi B. I know she's famous now and she's doing her thing, but she doesn't know you. You have no real relationship to her. And it's coming through a whole lot of technology, exactly. Just like some broadcasting studio somewhere. That's, just so far removed from the guy sitting next to you playing his acoustic instrument. So I started playing regularly because it felt good in Bombay Beach to play an acoustic guitar and somebody hears me. Yeah.
There's a film I made called Being in the World, which is what this podcast is named after. And it was my attempt at taking these philosophical ideas that had a big impact on me when I was at Berkeley. And my mentor there was a guy named Hubert Dreyfus, and he was the world's leading authority on Martin Heidegger, who's a very difficult German philosopher. But he was interested in how his ideas kind of applied to the real world. And one of those was a critique of technology, and not just technology in the sense of the devices, but what he called the technological understanding of being, and which is where everything is turned into kind of a resource to be manipulated and be as kind of elastic as possible, but thereby lose all meaning, because the meaning requires differences, right? Because if something is the same as something else, then why would you, where does the significance come from? And the music is the best example of this. So there's this idea of focal practices. And the word focal comes from fuoco in Latin and Italian, it means fire. So to focus, and in Italian, to focus a camera means mettere a fuoco, means to put into fire, right? So the idea of making something specific to that time and place is essential to this kind kind of philosophical understanding of our human practices. And the idea is that if you wanted to listen to music in the old days, exactly as you described, you had to gather, if not around a fire, at least in a particular room, in a particular place. And, you might pick that room because of the acoustics that it had. And so therefore the room suddenly would shine as being the room in which you played music. It was different from other rooms, right?
Yeah.
And then you would play a certain instrument, and all your practice and style and technique would come to that instrument, and you would be important and meaningful because you would be different from the guy who played the other instrument, right? And so it would distinguish individuals, right? And then so the time, the place, the objects, and the people all have meaningful differences, which the promise of technology is to make the kind of the need for skillfulness go away, which sounds wonderful because you say, okay, well, you don't have to go to school for years to learn an instrument or to learn how to cook. You can just like buy a microwave and this prepackaged meal. But then all of those focuses of meaning, those loci of like meaningfulness, just get washed out. Because suddenly it doesn't matter who you are, because anyone can turn on an iPod and listen to the music, or turn on the TV and listen to Cardi B, and anybody. It doesn't matter what time it is. You can turn on your song at your iPod at any moment, and it doesn't matter where you are. It's going to you have your headphones on, and all of that. We all are familiar with this kind of, oh well, this song isn't doing it for me. I often think when you're listening to a great, you could be listening to one of the greatest pieces of music ever, but it's just not right for your mood at that moment. So you just click on to the next thing. And I often think like, wow, I would never do this if, James Brown was in the room with me. I wouldn't just move on to the next room. But there's something about it just being available and equally available to everything else, which suddenly makes it not matter what it is you're listening to. And then what the result is, a very impoverished existence. And it's kind of the theme of this podcast is sitting in the room with somebody, even now, like having this conversation, we're using the technology as a kind of background thing, but it's nice that we're like sitting in a room having a conversation, right?
Well,
sort of face to face.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that, that Bombay Beach and Slab City brought to me was this kind of one-on-one. I mean, where I was living in Oxnard, it was a very well-heeled neighborhood, and I would go to yoga, and I kind of knew people to nod at and say hello to, but rarely actually spoke to them and didn't really know my neighbors. And out here, you just sort of, it's a different thing. It's very much like an older kind of lifestyle. I think that's why people like it so much. Mm-hmm. Like I can go to Slab City and a bunch of people will be really happy to see me, genuinely happy to see me. If I go back to my old neighborhood, it's not like that. If I show up, I mean, hopefully the ski-in will open again soon. But
I think it's been kind of quietly opening.
I hope so, because I just loved that I could walk in here, and and I'd see half a dozen people that I know, and we would talk about stuff, and it just felt so genuine. In comparison with this other life in which everybody's got their car and their whatever their personal entertainment thing is.
I've heard you say about, I heard you listen to, I heard you interviewed for my friend Susanna's film.
Yeah.
And, two people are walking outside about to take our picture. So you talked about the fact that there's so many memorials here in Bombay. And Heidegger has this idea of the importance of, and the whole existentialist tradition kind of embraces death as a prerequisite for meaning, because again, it's this idea that you can't have all choices matter equally. And if you lived forever, any choice would make no difference, because you along the path, you could then make the other choice, right? If you had an infinite amount of time, right, no decision would matter. Whereas the concept is, it's called running forward into death. And the idea is that you're supposed to, an authentic existence requires you to acknowledge tacitly that each decision necessitates the death of every other decision that you didn't make, and therefore gives a certain, like, poignancy to the decisions you do make.
Yeah, well, I've heard it said, I don't know if it's true, but that there's that the etymology of the word decide, it's like sort of homicide, suicide, decide.
Oh, interesting. I had
You
not heard
you
that.
kill something off when you make this decision, like I'm going to do this and not that.
That's fantastic. So I'm wondering if the fact that Bombay Beach, a lot of people ran away from it and don't, until the crazy artists arrived, nobody would stay. A lot of people wouldn't stay here because you're faced with death. You're faced with the death of the sea, of these fish, death of old people that, are dying at an alarming rate. There's just the buildings are dying. Everything seems to be dying. And yet people seem to be drawn to it for this mysterious reason that I think you're kind of zeroing in on.
Well, it was a great place for me to die and be reborn.
Yeah.
And the music thing for me had died out of boredom. And then I started playing here. A Slab City guy got me a job at playing at the American Legion. And then I started playing at the Ski Inn. And people were listening. They weren't satiated. They weren't jaded. They weren't bored.
Yeah.
And I felt, as an artist, I'm sure you felt some of this too, even though your medium, well, I don't know exactly which media you work in, but there's a way in which there's a completed circuit between the artist and the viewer, and that there's some sort of sense. Like if you paint a painting and then lock it in a closet, that's different from if you hang it up somewhere and, and someone sees it. And so generally you create a work of art for it somehow completes it or adds to it that there's an audience that perceives it and hopefully gets value from it.
Within a context too.
So, as I started playing here, I was like, oh, playing music is fun when people actually listen to you. And you can sense it, that they're listening and responding. And so I came back to my roots of, like, why do I? In fact, in a weird way, I actually don't want to broadcast this, but out here, a lot of times I'm not getting paid when I play.
Right.
Which back when I was a professional musician, I would never do that. It's like, you definitely got to pay me. I might be having fun playing for you, but I, as a matter of just professional pride, should be paid. But then I found, out here there wasn't really much in the way of paying work, and even the pay that I did get, I played some things where I did get actually a paycheck, but it was like so little money as to have been insulting by my previous standards, But I kind of didn't care. I went back to playing for love rather than money, even if there was some money involved, which just felt a lot better somehow.
So the word amateur comes from amare, to love.
I was just telling my girlfriend that, and there's a song by Joe Jackson called Amateur Hour where he says the world would be a better place if some of us would stay amateurs. And so I feel like, I've kind of come full circle from being an amateur to a professional and going back.
First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. Have you heard that Zen expression?
Well, I've heard it. There was a Donovan
Song,
record with that in it. Yeah,
but it comes from a Zen saying, which is when
Yeah.
before you start studying Zen, a mountain's just a mountain, and then you start to question everything and the nature of reality, and then there is no mountain. You realize everything's an illusion, and then you study Zen for decades and you become enlightened, and then you look and the mountain's just a mountain again.
Well, I always liked that lyric. It's just it has a cool feeling to it. The way he sings it is cool.
Yeah.
And I never really had thought about what it meant, but it felt good. I wanted to get back. There's something that was crossing my mind about technology and music, or probably technology and some other arts as well. One of my favorite things to do as a musician always has been, like even when I was working as a full-time professional, sometimes we'd get to the end of the evening and there weren't very many people left, but the audience that was left was pretty enthusiastic. So I would unplug my instrument and play without using a microphone. And what I noticed was that people would really feel it when you do that. Like if you sing for somebody without any technological intermediate, there is no microphone, there's no amplifier, no speakers. I don't know if they know that that's what's happening, but it's like everybody just sort of perks up and it feels really intimate, and it's just a whole different animal. There's a freshness to it, a directness to it. And I think that we don't realize a lot of times, we're so used to technology. I mean, like even our friendships now are usually over, or very often a lot of it is over social media.
Yeah.
You know,
Mediated.
or like I'm in a relationship where, it's one of these long distance things, and probably 80% of our relationship is conducted over the phone, which is lovely, but it's not the same. No. There's something about when a person speaks to you or sings to you, and it's just right from their vocal cords right into your ear. I mean, speaking of which, it's a very funny experience for me. I don't even know why podcasters do it, where I got my headphones on and you're right over there. We don't necessarily need the headphones.
Actually creates it paradoxically, I think, creates more intimacy, because you can speak more quietly and just hearing it's interesting, because there are some cases of technology kind of being wielded against itself. I see this as one of those instances. The archetypal instance for me is the DJ taking the record, which is meant to be this passive technological listening device, and turning it into an active, skillful behavior by like learning how to scratch and doing all these things. And you see it, human beings seem to like thrive on this tension where the technology comes and makes you into a passive, meaningless, consumer, but then we fight back. It happened with photography. Photography was just the way to not have to learn to paint and have to sit for a portrait. And nobody, when it came out, would have thought photography could ever be an art form, right? And then people started to dive in and learn the craft of the darkroom and of and everything from lenses to just composition and creating scenes and everything. And then photography became an art form. And then Photoshop comes along and teaches allows you to discard all of those skills that were required to be in the darkroom. And there's always this push towards more meaninglessness. I noticed even being on the phone when it first came out, the iPhone, I thought, great, I'm untethered from my computer at home. I can be in the world again. And yet then the phone becomes another step towards homogenization and meaninglessness, and to the point where I stopped documenting as much, because I used to be the guy with the camera who liked to take pictures and take videos, and now that everybody takes pictures and videos, I've had to find a new way to engage in a unique way with the world, and this is one of them. So I'd like to think that we're using the technology against itself. I think that the whole phenomenon of podcasting is astonishingly against the grain when we think of everything being so ADD, and us always, the Instagram stories being 15 seconds and people can't even wait the 15 seconds for the little clip. They have to click on to the next thing. And yet for some weird reason, people are willing to sit for 3 hours and listen to a conversation that's completely unedited. And so this is always this hunger for this return to meaning, to a certain pace. And to me, this, the fact that we're wearing these headphones, it's almost like you're whispering in my ear and I'm whispering in yours. And
I'm whispering in my own ear. That's what's interesting to me about this experience I'm having right now, is that I'm hearing my own voice speaking in my ear as I speak, which, I never do that, to actually, and I can kind of get closer to the mic and hear myself whisper to myself. So it's giving me a new experience of myself speaking, which is kind of fun.
And it makes it more thoughtful, I think, in a way, for some weird reason. I want to find out, if you're listening to this, tell us, why do podcasters do this? I just assumed it was better because also you would be aware if you cut out for some reason.
I always thought it was weird. I figured that's what you have an engineer for, except that we don't have an engineer. But, like when Joe Rogan does his thing, I just think, well, yeah, why don't they take off those headphones, just talk, have a guy record it. But okay, if it works for them.
But so you said that everybody here in Bombay Beach had some sort of like traumatic reason for being here, and I found that now I've had like Sonia on,
Oh,
and
how
a
did
couple other
Sony? Well, I guess I'll have to watch that podcast.
You should, but I mean, when you talk about trauma, I'm talking heavy trauma. You know, like a lot of death and violence and things that are And she was amazingly kind of frank and honest about it, and so I mean, I've also noticed that there's this attracts outsiders, right? It attracts people who might not have felt at home anywhere else. Like it's a group of outsiders finding an outsider place in which they suddenly paradoxically feel at home because they're just surrounded by other people who never had a home.
That's another reason why I came here too. I mean, I had dreamed of Slab City since I saw Into the Wild, and I thought, I'd really want to visit that place at some point.
With Emile Hirsch, I highly recommend this movie if you haven't seen it. And there's important scenes that happen in Slab City.
Yeah, and it was all real. I mean, they really just showed this guy's life as he lived it, and he had been to Slab City, and so they just made it as true to life as they could. And so I watched that and was just like, I have to definitely see that before I die. That went on my bucket list, which is another reason why I came down here when I was broke. I thought, now's my chance to see Slab City. But I had this moment of anxiety. I was like, okay, I've been an outsider all my life. I've never felt like I belonged anywhere. And now I'm going to the island of misfit toys. I'm going to the place where all the outsiders go. What if I don't fit in there either? I was actually really kind of scared in a subliminal way, because I thought, if I go to the home of the outsiders and I'm still an outsider, then there's no place left. I've gone to the end of the world, and it's all over. Luckily, I fit in reasonably well out here, actually.
Let's back up a little more. Give me a little more background into like childhood and growing up. How was it that you were an outsider? Where were you? What were the circumstances of your birth and your early life?
Well, so the thing about my childhood, why I would say I was an outsider, was that I was basically kind of an intellectual kid. I mean, my parents, we listened to kind of highbrow music and
Where?
In Sylmar, California. Sylmar is the north end of the San Fernando Valley. This was the early 60s. And Sylmar in those days was very rural. It was really kind of, there weren't as many freeways. I mean, the 405 and the 101 freeways didn't exist when I was born. So you just wouldn't go in to Hollywood, or any of the more, upscale or, areas that attracted people who were more intellectual or cultured. My neighborhood was really very 4-H club. It was just like really, I had a neighbor who raised pigs, and there were like, and nothing against people who raise pigs. I like pigs quite a bit, and we've got chickens out here too. But it was like this real kind of farming-oriented neighborhood, and I was just sort of made fun of as a kid because I was, kind of this philosophical, spiritually seeking, brighter than most of my neighbors kid, and just felt like a weirdo everywhere I went. And that didn't change when I got older either.
Did you leave for college?
No, I didn't go to college. I was one of those, there's a certain type of smart person who just says the hell with it and drops out, and I was one of those. But then I went off to Europe. I lived for 21 years in Europe, and I was the odd American in this small redneck village. Like if Germany has rednecks, they were in my village, like 800 people. And it was again a kind of a lowbrow, I guess would be the expression, neighborhood. So I just didn't fit, and then I went off to Oxnard, where I was living before I came here, which I was out at the beach, and out there I just got this feeling like it was an area full of people who kind of had more money than I did, and I felt like, well, I'm nobody because I don't have a boat,
Right.
So I just and you know, some of it also might be there's it's quite likely that there are people, and I would be one of them, that are just born with the idea I don't fit in, you know. But I think I really kind of didn't. I mean, other kids used to make fun of me and throw stuff at me when I was a kid. I was maybe a little bit weird too. Anyway, so I just kind of thought, God, you know, I've always felt like an outsider. Now I hope maybe there's one place where I fit in, and you know, miraculously enough, you know, I do feel. I mean, there's some tension in Bombay Beach anyway among the different types of folks who live here. So I may fit in with more so than others, but being the local musician, you know, I could walk into the ski inn and generally most of the folks were happy to see me. And I think the only people I made unhappy to see me in this town were those various meetings you were talking about. Yeah, I got on the bad side of some folks, I think.
For defending the artists.
For defending the artists. And, you know, there was one meeting in which, you remember when, I probably shouldn't even bring this up.
Yes, you should.
For fear that, like,
spill the beans.
Some old guard Bombay Beachers might watch this, but you know, I was telling the truth as I saw it. It had to do with a Sunday morning, when they served breakfast at the American Legion, and the art crowd came in. It was like you and Stefan and some other people. I think I'm pretty sure you were there that day. And I was the local musician, so I was entertaining during that Sunday brunch, and they wouldn't seat you guys. They just said, "Okay, I don't know, you're not welcome here" or something. They turned you guys away.
We don't want your kind here.
Is that what they said?
Controversial said. They said that. Well, they said that to some Asian students of Mark Max.
That's what I heard. Although now I thought, well, I wasn't there. And maybe it was misinterpretation. Who knows? I thought I'll give them a pass on that one, was my thought at the time. But I was, you know, standing there doing my music thing, watching you guys get turned away, and breakfast wasn't over yet because other people were getting served. And so I just thought, okay, this is what I'm seeing, is the art crowd is being refused service. And then at one of the Bombay Beach local meetings, somebody got up and said that wasn't true, that they didn't refuse to serve you. And so then I felt like I didn't really want to get mixed up in it, but I was like, well, you know, I can't just let this go. So I got up and said, okay, I was there. This is what I saw. This is what I remember. So I don't think that it's true that the art group was being refused service. I think it's true that they were being refused, and that if someone's telling a different story, that's not what I saw. So I figure I kind of disingratiated myself at that point.
Now for the record, they're really nice to us now again.
That's good. Well, you know, and I noticed that they aren't uncordial to me. Like when I see them,
they've changed their tune completely.
That's
and it's
great.
You know, the great thing about being in a small town, I think one of the worst things about living in Los Angeles is that anyone that even slightly bothers you, you can just choose never to see them or speak to them so easily that it's almost like if you're going with the path of least resistance, you can just you can just ignore people and they can ignore you. And I think that's what gives Los Angeles its deserved reputation for being so, profoundly superficial. And I think that living in a small town, the path of least resistance is not to avoid the issue. It's just you can't. You're gonna run into these people every day, so it forces you to kind of work it out.
Well, that's something I've always liked about this place too, is that I know people who have very unfavorable opinions about some other people in town. Like, you know, some folks who really despise and have nothing good to say about some other folks. And yet, particularly when there's a memorial, and as you were mentioning, there's been a lot of memorials in this town since I've been here, because, you know, we've got a aging population, the climate's really harsh out here. And I've attended and sung for just, you know, so many memorials. And, you know, the people bury the hatchet at least long enough to be cordial and civil and show up and honor the dead, and and
You
I
mean when the
thought,
person they hate has died, or you mean to be next to other people that they hate, acknowledging the person that
well,
has
I
died?
suppose I haven't paid attention to that. I'm not talking about people going to a memorial for somebody that they really didn't like, but
You're talking
they,
about just coexisting at a memorial for a third
yeah,
party.
they'll
Okay,
they'll
yeah.
go to say, okay, like, so and so died and we all cared for this person, and I'm going to set aside the fact that I can't stand this person who's a few feet away from me.
Right.
We're just going to all get together and be decent about this. And I have also thought, yeah, you can't avoid folks you don't like in this town. If there's somebody that you don't like or doesn't like you, you're going to run into them.
I met Gloria Steinem once at a brunch in Sundance, and we were just chatting. And I don't know how it came up, but she said she thought that family was an institution that was created in order to force us to get along with people we don't like. And it's a bit like what's happening here, I think. It's become a bit of a family, I think. And so we just, even if we don't like each other, I'm sure we've all had this experience with siblings or cousins or, just people that we're forced to like be near. And even though we don't like them, we got to get along with them. And it's such a microcosm of the larger issues that are going on in society. I keep seeing that even with COVID now. Like, it was incredible, the factions that existed in a small group out on Mars. It was 30 people, and there was like, the anti-maskers, there was the people who are, overly paranoid about it. It ran the gamut. And then people, and someone said, there was a group chat, and someone said the worst, havoc that COVID has wreaked on this community has been this very chat, right? Like the hatreds that it engendered, and like the disagreements, and people were so passionate about it. And again, they had to work it out. Except
Well,
some people just left because they were just so
that's
so disagreeing.
the problem with that one. And that I've had a really rough year. I mean, like I've lost a lot of friends, or there are a lot of people that I really don't care to speak to again.
Which
I
side
mean,
of this
in a way,
spectrum
it's
are you
like,
on? Which side of this debate do you find yourself on?
well, you probably could guess because we briefly talked about it on the berm there one day. I personally think that there's no more risk from this virus than there has been from past viruses. So there's no more reason to panic about this particular virus than there has been for any other flu in the past. In fact, perhaps you know that Woodstock happened. When Woodstock happened, there was a really nasty flu going around that killed a lot of people. The Hong Kong flu of 1969. And everybody still got naked, and you don't see any masks or social distancing at Woodstock. And I would think that actually, if people had been really paying attention and like really going beyond the headlines to see what the death rate actually is, that by now, after it's been a year now of lockdown, that people would realize this. And so where I see in this situation that the immovable object meets the irresistible force, where it's like, I don't know how to compromise in this, is like, okay, let's say you, the person over there, thinks that there's this terrible, terrible danger. And anyone who doesn't agree that there's a terrible danger and who refuses, heaven forbid, to wear a mask around you is now endangering your life and endangering everyone's lives. I mean, I lost friends over the fact that back in like late last summer, I used to regularly, just for the joy of it, there were anti-mask rallies where you'd have like 500 people in one place, all like giving speeches and talking about how they thought that this was tyranny. And, then I'd go see some friend of mine and I'd say, oh, by the way, just in the interest of full disclosure. So, because I felt like ethically I should let them know in case it would freak them out. And I'd go, yeah, by the way, I thought I'd drop in and we'd have dinner, but I just came from a rally with 500 people not wearing masks. And my friend would go, well, then don't come over here. How about that? And I understand that if you believed that, I was endangering my poor dear mother, who I also would go visit
So I guess you don't have many people that you know that have died from this.
I don't know anybody who's even gotten sick from it. I do know people who say that they know people who died from it. And I know that the official statistics say that the death rate is like 0.1% or something of people who contract this. So I think, okay, I'm not disputing that people die from something and that it's some kind of perhaps a contagion, although there's still the rabbit hole of do we accept germ theory or not? But is this worse than diseases in the past? And as far as I can tell, the overall death rate has not changed. So either the death rate miraculously went down 20% last year so as to, like you could add 500,000 extra deaths and still come out to the same number, or something's going on. I would say the statistics have been manipulated. And, when they say, oh, they died of COVID, well, they died of something that had these symptoms. And usually they also had, some kind of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, something like that. So I think the world, and something that fascinates me about this, you were talking about death, right? And this is something I think people don't talk enough about. Like I'm really interested in the idea of death. And so I've got a girlfriend, I'm in love right now. And one of the reasons I'm in love with this woman, I got to know her online. And she says, yeah, I'm an artist. Go look at my website, and you can look at my art. And I look at her art, and one of her major pieces is called Trust in the Idea of Death. And I was just like, oh, honey, I have to meet you. I adore you already. Just because, we're all like sweeping this under the rug, like, and trying to pretend we're immortal or, thinking, part of how this is sort of tying in my mind is that one of the things I think is underlying this COVID phenomenon is the idea that death shouldn't happen. It's like they'll say, during the presidential campaign, well, if I'd been president, no one would have died from this. And I'm like, there's still, if you take the long view, the death rate is 100%. Every single one of us. I'm going to be a desiccating skeleton one of these days, and so are you, And we may as well factor that in, and you can even you can make art out of it.
I've never been so torn over an issue because I'm right in the center here. Like I sympathize, and it's interesting the way it doesn't fall along what you would have expected to be the political lines. I think there's been an interesting phenomenon of progressives letting go of certain ideals that I think used to be kind of essential to the progressive worldview. And I think that's a real danger, like whether it's free speech or distrust of authority and of government in all its forms.
Because I always thought, as a kid in the 60s or as a political person growing up, I don't trust the government. I don't trust the CIA. I grew up in the Vietnam War era, so I was like, okay, the CIA is going around overthrowing governments. We don't like that, and they're doing a secret bombing, and and all of a sudden it's like, no, trust the FBI, trust the CIA, trust the CDC, and I'm just like, okay, is this the left that I grew up with? And also, censorship is a good thing.
Yeah.
I was a member of the ACLU, and to me, ACLU meant Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, You remember maybe back in the day, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, that one of the big black eyes, or it was a big controversy that the ACLU got into, was defending the right of the Nazis to march.
Yeah.
So their idea was, okay, you're a right-winger, you've got terrible ideas that we violently or vehemently disagree with, but you have the right to assemble and to speak your mind, which I personally think is also smarter, because when you drive movements underground, then they really get nasty.
Yeah. No, you should fight ideas with better ideas, I think. Bad ideas with good ideas.
Yeah,
but there is it's becoming an old-fashioned view of this kind of more libertarian left. Is I encounter less and less of it, and so I think people get pushed to this weird right wing place that used to traditionally be pro authority, police, and authority in all its forms. It seems a more authoritarian perspective, the right wing. And now there's been this weird, subtle, or not so subtle, maybe, polar, shift. What do you call it? When the pole reversal, right? When that happens. And then as far as the actual numbers, it's like, it's so right in that kind of sweet spot of ambiguity when it comes to COVID. You could easily imagine it having been 10 times deadlier, where it would just be obvious to everyone that this thing was bad.
If there were bodies piling up in the streets, then I would say, okay, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, there were instances of that, the Spanish flu or the Black Death or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, but I have a lot of friends who've dedicated their lives to, helping others either through, a lot in medicine, for example. I have several friends who are ER doctors, and they've said, it's not as bad as we feared at first, but it's definitely worse than the flu. And it's like, and I've had friends' parents die who were otherwise healthy. And in Italy, it was really bad. We had, several family friends who died. And it's not fun. Even the people who are healthy that got it, that I know, and at this point I know probably 50 people who've had COVID, like it's a weirdly random thing, but generally people who each decade that advances, the worse it is. And I have a friend in Italy who was like the epitome of good health. And, 1 month he couldn't move. Like he was like literally like take 3 steps and then have to sit down and like. So it's definitely something I don't want to catch, but at the same time, I also share like these kind of libertarian tendencies and a kind of faith that things are going to be okay, and a certain a certain optimism and a certain restlessness after a certain amount of time. If this had been a month or two, is one thing. So it's been fun being in Bombay Beach, I must say. Like we've had our arguments, we've had our cases. I mean, the owners of the ski inn caught COVID. They did not have fun with it, but they're okay. And so we've seen the gamut, I think, and it's been really interesting to kind of witness it in a small scale, but also be away from where it's really affected things. Because of course, being outside helps here and having the wind, and I think that there's a reason why the cases are worse in places where people are in confined small spaces.
Well, I'm kind of surprised we haven't had more trouble with it since one of the things that people say about Bombay Beach and about the Salton Sea, although I'm never quite sure what to believe. There's all these people that say, the dust of Bombay Beach is toxic and we have got lots of asthma. But people here there's some people that sort of like gloom and doom generally anyway, and so I'm not sure how seriously to take it. But in in an area where the conventional wisdom is that the air isn't good out here and there's a lot of asthma, I'm surprised that we haven't had, as far as I know, there's not a death here attributed to that.
Yeah.
And we've got an old population with health problems. I mean, going back to this thing of all these memorials, there's been a lot of death here from every other cause but COVID. If you don't mind, I'd like to sing a serious song sort of about this.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. And I want to hear your song about the Salton Sea crazies.
Yeah, it has to, this was one that I wrote about this phenomenon because there was a time when I was visiting a sick friend, and this friend asked could they give me a hug? And that wasn't allowed. I really was supposed to not be actually allowed in the room, and they let me give this quick hug, and I thought, I would like to be able to say, I would like to be able to even post something on Facebook or tell a friend, this kindness was done for me. I was allowed to hug somebody when it was forbidden by the government, And then I thought, I can't even tell anyone because this poor guy will lose his job for having broken the rules, And I just thought, what kind of world is this when in the, even attributing good intentions to the government, which I don't believe that this was well-intentioned, this whole lockdown and so forth. But even saying it was all well-intentioned, the human cost has been really great. And there's this sense of I can't even say, oh, it was really nice that this guy let me bend the rules, because he could lose his job. You know, that facility could have been shut down if the powers that be ever found out. So I started thinking about that anyway. Get the microphone in closer. No, farther.
Farther if you're going
For
to sing
singing,
loud.
yeah. Well, I'm always going to sing loud. It's the old street musician in me. You know, and sitting around the campfire in Slab City, you got to sing loud. Okay. Stowed away in secrecy, hiding from the powers that be, my soul is Anne Frank's family, waiting for the knock on the door. Kindnesses are given me, and I accept them gratefully, but I'm afraid someone will see, and I'll hear the boots on the floor, and the knock upon the door. The canary in the coal mine sings a mournful, haunting song, calling out a warning of a time perhaps to come, when kindness and humanity are driven underground. He sings one final note and then falls lifeless to the ground, and doesn't make a sound. And if someday they come for me, will you shake your head in sympathy, draw the shade and turn the key, and hide behind the door? And when they finally come for you, and there's no one to stand up for you, remember songs I've sung for you till my voice was heard no more. When you hear the boots on the floor, and they're breaking down your door.
Nice. Although I have, they say there's a law of the internet that every discussion eventually will just devolve into being compared to Nazis.
Godwin's law, I think that is.
Yes.
I know, and
You've turned that into a song.
Yeah, I got the idea for that song and thought, that's pushing it too far. I probably shouldn't write this. But, I think that about half the stuff I write. I'm always writing stuff and going, that's pushing it. I shouldn't say this. And including, this one about the Salton Sea, the psycho from the Salton Sea. There's a line in it where I mentioned dildos. And you're, of course, very intimately familiar with it. But for the folks who aren't from Bombay Beach and not involved with the art movement here, the old guard of Bombay Beach, the folks who are resistant to the art movement, one of their objections is that the art here is pornographic. So they brought this up at there was a meeting a month or so ago, that there's pornography, and somebody said, well, tell us where the pornography is. Well, I can't tell you, but it's pornography. But there is one thing that I remember hearing when I got up at the Imperial County Supervisors meeting. I think it was that meeting, maybe it was another one, where there was a woman who got up speaking against the art, who said, I've got children here in Bombay Beach and there's dildos everywhere. And I thought, well, one person's dildo is another person's art glass. Although the shapes do have a certain resemblance, but not really. They resemble more eggplants than actual,
sex toys,
actual phalli. But still, so I got the dildos in this song. When I sang this for my mother, I took the dildo part out.
So we're gonna get the uncensored version.
Yeah, this is the uncut version of this song. By the way, this title came out because this woman who I'm in love with, her son at first didn't like me. He changed his mind, but in the beginning, he had met me out here in Bombay Beach. And,
how old is he?
22, and she was talking to me on the phone. He says, "You're not talking to that psycho from Bombay Beach again, are you?" And I just thought that just cracked me up, and so I immortalized it. And he doesn't call me the psycho anymore, which kind of makes me sad. I wish he would still call me psycho.
You're gonna have to ham up your psycho side a little more, maybe.
I don't want to trigger the gentleman. It's bad, or it's kind enough for him to. I mean, I understand. If you're 22 and your mom is 63, and all his life, all he'd known is she's the devoted wife to this gentleman who died a year ago. That's a weird adjustment. Like, mom's got a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. Mom is, spending the night with this boy. So he's been awfully nice to just even, to not like really raise more of a ruckus than he has. And now he's completely over it and doesn't call me the psycho anymore. But anyway, at that time, I just thought, okay, I'm the psycho from the Salton Sea. So I wrote this song, which features dildos and various other landmarks. Those of you who haven't been to Bombay Beach, you have to come down here, see the dildos, see the Bombay Beach Estates, see the Save Me sign. It's all in there. All right. You know the Sheik of Araby, you know the Duke of Earl, but none of them compares to me. Oh, won't you be my girl? I'm the psycho from the Salton Sea, a man of notoriety everywhere in the vicinity of the shores of the Salton Sea. I'm a nut job, but I mean no harm. Let me take you by the arm and thrill you with psychotic charm on the shores of the Salton Sea. Place your dainty hand in mine. To the top of the lodestar we will climb, high above Bombay Beach at night, surrounded by dildos filled with light. Underneath the desert stars above, we'll share that sweet psychotic love. It'll be all we've been dreaming of on the shores of the Salton Sea. When we pass through those golden gates of the Bombay Beach Estates, you'll press your luscious lips to mine beneath the neon Save Me sign. Our hearts will start to palpitate as we slip into an altered state, making love while we hallucinate on the shores of the Salton Sea. I'm the psycho from the Salton Sea. You can share in my insanity. We'll be like two cuckoos in a tree on the shores of the Salton Sea. On the shores of the beautiful Salton Sea.
Bravo.
Thank you, Tao. My enthusiastic audience of one.
Well, there's a few dozen more on the interwebs. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you think we should address?
Let's see, we got death in there. That's good. We got like art and death, and
Eros and Thanatos, is it?
Yeah, Thanatos is death.
Yeah, and Eros is life.
Is Eros life?
I think it's the opposite.
I thought. I always thought Eros was sex.
It is, but I think that's the part of that's life. It's part of the creation of life, right?
Well,
some people juxtapose it as the opposite of Thanatos.
Well, we haven't talked. Well, and it could be. I mean, certainly, the act of procreation would be about as close to the opposite of death as you can get. Yeah, we haven't talked about trains. Isn't it great to hear those trains go by?
Yeah, I love it.
You know what? Something I love about trains, I don't know if you've noticed this, that every train is playing a different chord.
I did not know this.
Yeah, listen to the chords. As the train goes by, it plays a chord.
The entire train? Or the entire train is playing one chord?
Well, they have that horn. Mm-hmm. And the horn is usually 4 notes. And it'll be playing something like that, or like... those kind of chords as they go by, and sometimes it's the same train, so it's playing the same chord, but there's at least a half a dozen of them, and they go by, and I'm like, whoa, somebody had to program that horn to play that chord, and it's so hip. Like, there's some jazz dude out there tweaking train horns, and I want to know who that guy is.
I want to know that too.
Yeah.
That's a really good.
I Googled it, and the best article I could find said, "Oh, they're all tuned to a minor 6, which minor 6 would be like that, but they're not." Because I listened to them, and I'm like, no, that is not the minor 6. That's like that one's one that goes by a lot.
Let me ask you that besides the kind of joy of playing music for people and what we talked about, this kind of around the campfire and the people listening, is there another kind of deep significance of music for you? Have you thought about why music touches us so much, besides this kind of gathering aspect that we've already talked about?
Well, I'm not sure if this is an answer to your question, but there is something that fascinates me about music, and I would love to know. And I puzzle over it a lot, because it's fascinating to me. Sort of a question of, the question is, does a given sound inherently have an effect, or do we culturally ascribe it? Having grown up in the era that I grew up and hearing the things that I heard, I can't tell where the one begins and the other ends. But I do know, for example, you know how like in a film noir, the femme fatale walks into the room, and what do you hear? You hear a saxophone, some kind of saxophone music that's kind of slow and swoops into the notes, and that is a sexy woman enters the room, right? And that fascinates me, is how is it that you can convey a mood with, or there's like also one, so here's another one. There's a type of song, like when you write a song, there's a certain kind of music that says Christmas, when you hear like this kind of bouncy, jolly mid-50s, like in Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You, they got that kind of lilt, that kind of bounce. So I'm just always fascinated with that,
I wonder if the like chords, for example, is a major chord sounds happier than a minor chord. And then we think of them, if you know a little bit about music, there's major scales and minor scales. But there's also like, that's only 2 of the modes that go from a very bright sound, which is the Lydian is the brightest. And then you flatten, you flatten the 4th of the Lydian, and then you get the major scale, which is the Aeolian, is it? Or Ionian?
Yeah, I don't know those. I didn't take music theory.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, each time you flatten one of the notes of the major scale, if you have all the white keys, that's the major scale. If you sharpen the F to an F sharp, that makes it the only one that's a little brighter than a major scale, and that's called the Lydian scale. And then if you flatten the 7th, you get a little slightly darker, and it's called the Mixolydian, and that's like a kind of gives you a kind of Grateful Dead sound, and then you get the Dorian, which is just one more that's flattened. And when you say flattened, you're bringing it literally down, right? And each time that you bring one of the notes down a half a step, you're darkening the mood of the scale. And what happens is, but by the time you've done that 4 times, you get the minor scale. You're flattening the 3rd, you're flattening the 6th, and you're flattening the 7th, right? And then if you keep going a little darker, you get the Phrygian. You darken the 2nd one, and that's the flamenco scale, which is a little even darker than the minor. And then you get into like all of the keys are flattened, and you get this really weird mode, which is called the Locrian, and nobody sings any songs except in like heavy metal. And there's like there's one traditional Irish song about like I'm walking like and dancing by your grave. So these ways of like darkening by bringing notes down and making it this like moodier, darker thing, is that intrinsic to bringing notes lower, or is that something that we've learned to associate with darkness? Could there be a Martian, who listens to music and all of a sudden when you're flattening these notes, sees that as a move towards a happier place? I think it's a very interesting question.
Yeah. So that's the thing. The thing that fascinates me about music is it clearly evokes emotion. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we use it, and it's great, as a songwriter, to to match a melody to a lyric so that they enhance each other, and the words to the song kind of go a little bit deeper because you're conveying an emotion at the same time with the melody. But yeah, how much of it is cultural? How much of it is ingrained? But it seems to me like there's something about it that just it expresses an emotion. I mean, another example is that one of my favorite, just a musical example of expressing an emotion is the Mexican hat dance. Because there's something that is so incredibly cheerful about that I just think, okay, why does that make me happy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would make anybody happy. I would think if you were just straight out of the rainforest
Yeah.
and had never heard not Mexican music, but Western music at all,
Yeah.
you'd just go, well, that's festive, that's fun, but why? Is it there is something rollicking about that rapid fire 3 tempo, that kind of has a swing to it. So I make use of the ability of music to evoke emotion, but I'm always curious about, why does that sound touching? Why does that sound sad? Why does that sound humorous? And I don't know.
And what do you think about, just switching gears a little bit, about the future? I just was reminded of a walk around Bombay Beach with a dear friend, and he said, I can already imagine what this is going to be like in 10 years, and I can already tell you I like it better now. And
I'd probably agree.
What do you think? We're just in that sweet spot of like just the great confluence of creativity, but still like this certain kind of totally off the beaten path. What do you think is the best direction we could take in this town? What do you think are the mistakes that we should avoid? Do you have any advice for those of us who love this place?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything to be done to avoid. I mean, some of the Bombay Beachers who are against the changes that have been happening, like if you remember Rocco, the famous Rocco, who I think isn't here anymore, but he would get up at meetings and say, this town's getting gentrified and it's going to ruin it. And certainly property values have gone up. Heaven knows when you first got here, they were giving property away. So yeah, the town's likely to gentrify. It's likely to have more nice houses in it. Which is one of the things that happens everywhere when the artists move in. When the artists will find lofts in downtown LA, and the next thing you know, that's the place to go. And certainly, Yucca Valley and 29 Palms have already had artists come in and improve or gentrify, change those areas. It's just part of the process. I mean, I don't know exactly, and I've always been curious about how the Biennale got started. I assume you loved this place because of, I guess, Kim Stringfellow, and then you started bringing your friends down here, and you guys started talking, and I think you guys were all involved in Burning Man in some way. You people who went there who at lot.
We drank from that source of inspiration somewhat when it was in certain ways, but I don't think it's a peripheral influence, I think.
Okay. So my assumption was that, and I guess it's wrong, I thought that maybe you had thought, well, Burning Man has gotten to be too much of a tech millionaire yuppie phenomenon, and let's do one that's more down home
well, I mean, the idea of a gathering that's not a festival with things on stages is a very inspiring one. And that it's true that Burning Man, it had done exactly what you said, and B, it was a very Northern California kind of phenomenon, populated by Northern Californians primarily. And Southern California just never had any sort of authentic art experience to be had. I mean, Coachella, horrible. Like I've never like
I never
had
went.
such a. I got a free ticket with backstage passes and everything. And I left after an hour because I just found it so just unpleasant to be in. And just, I don't know, I'm allergic to kind of corporatism. And it's just to me, like the idea of creating art and community and music and conversation that is not just banalized by that force of what corporations do. I mean, look, I was talking to someone on the podcast the other day, maybe it was with Sonia, that like there's no, if you go to get off a highway and enter a strip mall where all of the things are the same, all the stores and the gas stations, everything, not only is there just this sadly boring sameness, but how on earth could an artist express themselves in that space? It seems designed to like discourage and make that an impossibility. So I think that people are drawn here despite the sadness because there is a space for uniqueness, is a space for foster and nurture individuality. And we see that in all these people that we meet, yourself included. Like, I think that it's a fertile, despite the toxicity, there's a fertile soil for growing, creativity and humans here. And I think that's, I don't think people realize how original people used to be. I was so lucky to spend time in Spain with these old gypsies who played flamenco, and the spectrum of personalities is way bigger than what I think most people get to experience in a homogenized, contemporary technologized society. I'm talking characters who will entertain you for hours just sitting there with them, and surprise you with the words that come out. And I think we each have a responsibility and to try and nurture that in ourselves. Someone said, if you're invited to dinner, you have a duty to be entertaining or to be, to be amusing. And I think that we lose that skill in the rest of the world. And I think here it happens to be a place that even coming from a place that's so opposite of this in Italy, and old villages with, thousands of years of history and culture and music and, religion and all of the things that kind of motivate, inform a culture. All of that is absent here in a way. And yet there's this specificity and space for I think, fostering community and creativity and this perverse, weird family that we have.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, I'm in love, and we spend a lot of time talking about how weird we are. Like, I'll say, I thought I was too weird for somebody to want to hang out with me, and she'd be like, yeah, I thought I was too weird too, and I'd be like, isn't it remarkable that two weirdos met and get along so well? But I've started having the thought that probably, like, everybody, if you scratch the surface, like, we're all sort of trying. It's almost like it's as if we were like when I was a kid and we would get stoned. The expression in those days, like, you maintain, like, you got to maintain your composure so as to not get pulled in by the cops, So it's like, I'm stoned, but I'm going to act like I'm not stoned so as to pass, And we've got this kind of homogenous culture in which, all the food is packaged and standardized, and so are the restaurants, and and at this point also, what with like politics being what they are, the window of acceptable discourse is very, very narrow as well. Like the acceptable viewpoints, you're not really allowed much leeway, or you are, anathema. So there's this expectation that, like, you're not supposed to deviate, and and so that was part of my thing of feeling like an outsider growing up, was like, well, I guess I'm just weird because I don't feel this way, or I don't agree with these things. And so it interests me to, now I'm curious about out in Spain, like, so, that if you're not trained by your culture to fit in and, I was once talking with a Russian woman who had been an exchange student in the United States, and she was shocked at, as a kid, as like a 16-year-old, she would be in school. She was, taking a year of high school as an exchange student. She'd raise her hand and say something that was outside of this, just say, well, what about something in some like history class or something? And the teachers would be very vehement about like, hammering her back down into place. It's like, no, that's not how it happened. That's not what we think. Just learn the material, do the test, standardize yourself. And I think it's partly perhaps the public school system out here of just like, you want to fit in, you'd better conform. And, woe be unto you if you are outside the box. And secretly, I think, an enormous number of us, probably practically everybody, is really pretty eccentric and odd.
But don't you think there's certain domains that seem to nurture originality more than others? There's always this tension. Obviously, you can't just reinvent the wheel and just do things that make no sense. There has to be your behavior, like the stoned kid, has to be intelligible to some degree, or you're just going to be crazy, right? And so that tension between conformism and originality is always there. It's there in music, it's there in personalities, it's there in architecture and everything human beings do. Because it's language itself. We're trying to create original sentences with words that come prepackaged, right? But I'm curious about whether certain cultures, certain eras, certain activities, nurture originality more. I think there's definitely things that seem to like try and stamp that out. And like, I do think corporate work, working under like this giant machine that like, it just tries to stomp that out, and it tries to like control language. It tries to control behavior in all of its minutia. So
yeah, I had felt like in Europe that there was a broader spectrum of certain kinds of expression anyway, like politically, in Germany, for example, there's, like a far right anti-foreigners party, and then there's like a far left communist party, and then the socialists and the Christian Democrats are in the middle. But these parties are they're allowed to exist,
Yeah.
and, a person can openly say, yeah, I'm in the Communist Party, so there.
And they can be friends with somebody who's,
I don't know if they'd like their neighbor who was a neo-Nazi necessarily, but it's not anathema. It's not like, okay, this person should never have a job. But there is an enormous conformity. I guess you just choose your conformities. Like, what color would you paint your house?
right.
And would you have junk cars in your yard? I mean, like the Germans are really, they don't do that sort of thing. So their house, the way that they would tend their yard, that's pretty standardized and well behaved. And then other things are considered to be, somewhat acceptable. Anyway, it just seems to me that the general run of the United States is very, very conformist, and if you have anything about you that doesn't fit, then you just be quiet about it. I think, which is, I was actually hoping we wouldn't talk about the COVID thing, because I thought the last thing I need is for people to know how weird I am about that. But
I know. I was thinking while you said it, oh shit, we're going to alienate half the audience just by this opinion. But hopefully we encourage people to allow diversity of opinion.
Well, that is one of the things I do hope for, and that's one of the reasons why I do sometimes bring up my outside the mainstream viewpoints. Is I think, well, hopefully it's clear that I don't, I don't have horns. I don't have a tail. I'm a human being, and I've thought about this, even if I happen to be wrong about it, I do have a viewpoint. And I think one of the things that has really troubled me this last year is there's a demonizing of people who don't agree with you.
Yeah.
Like the right-wingers who are mostly squelched right now. But when they talk among themselves, it's like I'm sort of friends with right-wingers and left-wingers. And so I hear, what they say about each other, and it's like, okay, this is like totalitarianism, socialism, and then the other side goes, oh, they're all white supremacists, and they're like, whatever the other side says, they must be delegitimized. They can't be spoken to, listened
Demonized.
to.
I think this whole distinction of right and left is causing more harm than good now. I think that we need to do everything possible to listen to each other, and the whole right left distinction came from the French Revolution, like where people sat, whether which side of the king they were sitting on, and maybe life is a little more complicated than this like dual distinction, and we're seeing all these views not fall neatly into place anymore. And maybe the lesson to be learned from that is that we should stop, just defining ourselves so oppositionally.
Well, it really it was an eye opener for me, not in a terribly pleasant way, but that I had always been, and still have an allegiance to some extent, the farther left politically regions of United States politics.
Same, yeah.
And, so then this last year, though, I was like, okay, you shouldn't shut down all the restaurants over a seasonal illness, not so horribly different from other illnesses that we've been through in the past. And the only people that seem to be speaking out from my point of view are people considered to be on the right. So am I a right winger now? Do I have to turn in my left winger card? And just the way that it came down.
I've had the same
ideologically.
experience
Yeah.
with free speech issues.
Yeah, because I've said to people like, okay, you really think they ought to? Well,
Ought to be
my sweetheart
deplatformed and
actually is on the other side, and we broke up over it a couple of times, and luckily got back together because I adore her, and we see a lot of things eye to eye. But I recall one time when I was just like, okay, well, I kind of know how this goes. It's like, okay, I'm against censorship, but I'm against hate speech, and this is hate speech. So it's a sticky wicket and very very divisive. And I like to keep my friends and loved ones, and I like to be seen as not a monster.
Yeah.
But so it's like, okay, if I don't want you to think I'm a monster, do I have to then shut my mouth? Do I have to never express my viewpoint?
Self-censorship is
And-
is a thing, for sure. There's definitely. I think they said like something like 60% of people, or more. I don't remember what the number was, but it was a huge majority of people have admitted that they have opinions that they privately believe that they are afraid to
Oh, absolutely.
admit to.
Yeah, and that
that's a
would
sad
be
state of affairs.
me in a nutshell. That I just don't. And you have to get along at some point. I mean, I have an acquaintance who went up to a place near here where, in order to get in, you have to let them take your temperature. You have to wear a mask. My friend starts talking about his rights, and I'm thinking, dude, I agree. I mean, I think being forced to wear a mask and have your temperature taken is silly and impinges on my freedom of movement and just being able to go where I please and so forth. But you just got to pick and choose where you cause a scene.
Right.
Like you can't be. I'd be causing a scene all day long everywhere. Like you want to go get food, you got to wear the mask. So I just suck it up and think, okay, the world.
It seems an odd hill to die on to me. As
Yeah,
much as I can
yeah.
sympathize with saying like, it's such a small inconvenience.
Not to me. See, now there is a sticking point. So me and my sweetie, we talk about that, where, a lot of people have a great deal of compassion for, let's say, if there's someone who's autistic. If you say, oh, well, I got this, autistic kid and he freaks out. Well, I might be somewhere on the spectrum. All I know is, like, I actually start to panic when you put a mask on me. Having something on my face where I can't breathe freely, I kind of quietly freak out. It does something to me psychologically. I don't feel well at all. So, people say it's a minor inconvenience. Not for me.
Interesting.
And especially when I feel like it's been imposed arbitrarily, unfairly not backed by science. And I think, well, folks, have a little compassion. For you, it might be no big deal. For me, it actually is, but I just suck it up, and you got to get through life. And certainly, I mean, I feel kind of blessed that I'm at the age that I am, where I've been through, semi-homelessness, I actually lived in Slab City before I came to Bombay Beach, and
How old are you?
64. So it's like, what the hell, I've slept in a freezing camper. I've slept on floors, I mean, so I can get through this, but, it's been rough, and I don't like losing friends over it. I don't like having to keep my mouth shut in order to avoid being ostracized. So, and so now everybody knows who watches this podcast.
All right.
Oh, well.
On that
But,
note, let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Unless did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say I had the same fear about if anybody ever heard these dirty songs of mine. And that hasn't seemed to have ended my career or my life, so we're all right, I guess.
Thank you, Richard.
Well, thank you, Tao, leading light
was
of
fun.
the art scene of Bombay Beach.